Greetings, system failure listeners. Me up here in Maine, Brian down there in Rhode Island. Brian, what's the good word down in Rhodey this week?
Oh, man. Well, it's getting to be summery out. I went for a run this morning. It was sweaty. I had to turn on the AC, and they've taken the cover off the pool, the cold saltwater pool here at the Slatersville Apartments. But there's a bunch of stuff floating in it, so I think they have to clean it before we use it.
They must be prepping to open that pool for Memorial Day weekend. That does seem like the ideal, which of course is next weekend, the unofficial kickoff to summer. I'm excited, Brian. You know, the weather up here in Maine is just like yours. We're going to touch 80 today. We were in the mid 70s yesterday. I was also out for a run, and I'll be doing another one after this podcast. And so, yeah, it is really, really nice to feel like summer has officially arrived after a week of, dismal 40 and 50 degree weather with rain. We seem like we are officially, on track to get kick summer off in time for Memorial Day weekend. Usually it seems like for whatever reason, it seems like we always get rain on Memorial Day weekend, Brian, but I am hopeful that this year we can have a nice sunny weekend just like this one. If we could just copy and paste this weather onto next weekend, I'd be delighted. It'll make the 2026 debut onto Willard Beach. Hopefully next weekend. I could not be more excited. It really does feel great.
Well, fingers crossed. One thing about the onset of summer, just compared to living in Portland, is just the crazy amount of insects that are swarming everywhere. They're not so much bitey insects, or at least not yet. It hasn't been like a mosquito and black fly thing. I don't know if black flies are only a Maine thing. But hordes of insects. And then also the area down here is like lousy with poison ivy. There's just tons of poison ivy growing all over the place.
Yeah, that's the worst, man. I remember the poison ivy days of our childhood where we had, I don't know why this was the case, but we had the black raspberry bushes, which I maintain are better than raspberries and better than blackberries, right? Everyone knows, all of our System Fair listeners will know, of course, there's the blackberries, which, like a raspberry, you pull a raspberry off the bush, right? And like the middle part, like it's shaped like a bowl, right? The raspberry has a hole in one end, right? You pull it off this nub. That's how the raspberry works. Blackberry does not work that way, right? The blackberry, you eat it, it still has the stem on the inside. It's like a corn on the cob where you can see there's that cob area inside the blackberry. But the black raspberry, right? It's like a raspberry in that it comes off the little nub. But it's tart and more firm than the blackberry flesh, so it's like a mixture. They're the best, but for whatever reason, something about the ratio of sunlight to shade or something, black raspberry patches are perfect for poison ivy cultivation, and so all of our black raspberry patches would be bursting into beautiful, ripe, colors about July, and the poison ivy, of course, would be coincident with all the black raspberry patches, and our parents would ask us, how did you get all this poison ivy? Well, I mean, you can't avoid these patches, and we'd be like, were you in the black raspberry patch? And we'd be like, I don't know, I have no idea how this could have happened. So that was growing, and so every year you just have those crazy itchy welts. Like best ones are on your ankles, man. The poison ivy, when it gets on your ankles and you have those socks, you're sitting in your elementary school in a hot early spring day, and your ankles are just itching terribly, and what you can, the best feeling in the world is to take the rubber heel of your sneaker and dig it into that ankle, where you got all the poison ivy welts under your sock, and just use the sock to just really scratch the hell out of that poison ivy. Of course, the poison ivy spreads everywhere after that, and you end up with an even worse case. But man, in that second, it's the most glorious feeling of all time when you're just scratching the ever-loving hell out that poison ivy, eh?
Yeah, well, a poison ivy rash, it's like having a sinus infection, like where you're cold and have the stuffy sinuses. Like your sinuses are just stuffed to the point that it's like a 10, and the itchiness is like a 10 out of 10. It just your state of affairs just could not be any worse. It's just unbelievably itchy, and there's all these little pustules that you want to burst. One really good way to scratch the poison ivy is with like a Magic the Gathering card, and just really give it the
scratching that's the real battle when you're a kid, right? You have this crazily itchy poison ivy, but all the adults are begging you please not to scratch it so that the rash doesn't spread. And it's just terrible because not scratching your poison ivy is a battle you can win, but it's a war you can never win, right? You cannot scratch your poison ivy now or in the next 5 minutes or in the next 10 minutes. but the temptation is always there, and all it takes is for you to lose discipline and patience but one single time, and then next thing you know, you're into that that joyous scratching, and then you have to suffer the consequences. So, well, I'm sorry to hear that the poison ivy is thick down there in Rhode, Brian. That's tough.
Well, because I noticed it growing around like the complex wherein I live. And let's see, one thing about Rhode Island is there's just lakes and dams everywhere. They've got the whole area dammed up. And so, like, just over by the post office, you can there's a little kind of a park thing you can walk down to and observe the dam. And then there's like this pathway, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go for a little walk down this pathway on a Saturday morning. And then I realized, wow, this is like, there's poison ivy everywhere here. And I don't know, so I just like went home and like took a shower and scrubbed off. And so maybe like we could have avoided a lot of suffering in our blackberry days or black raspberry days by just going and taking a shower and just washing off the crazy sticky oil or what have you.
Oh. That was quite beyond the pale when I was a kid. There was no way I could make a decision that would make my life better in the future in the moment when I was a kid. It was all so no can do. But yeah, I mean, that seemed like it would be totally worth it in retrospect, doesn't it, Brian?
It seems like an awfully easy solution. Yeah. Just one other thing about the blackberries. I don't know. Like, remember there used to be like boysenberry, like flavored yogurt and stuff.
Yeah. What is that? Boysenberry. Is that another word for black raspberry?
I don't know. I just looked it up, and apparently it's a cross between the European raspberry, European blackberry, and American dewberry. I don't know if this is some genetic freak.
That's interesting. I do remember we used to have this boysenberry yogurt flavor that would, be like the Dannon yogurt from when we were kids. But interesting, yeah. I never even thought about that. I just they must be closely related to blackberries, or another word for blackberries. I don't know. Maybe it's an old timey or like a European word for blackberries.
Well, I think the Colombo yogurt from back in the day, which was
Colombo, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a defunct yogurt brand for you.
Well, Colombo, I think, got done in by like one of the mini fat-free crazes at some point, because they actually had like, they used like whole milk or just normal milk in their yogurt, but people were done in by the fat-free craze, and now it's a lot of fat-free Chobani yogurt.
Yeah, that's not what you want. I'm just looking up here. It seems that in 2010, General Mills announced it was dropping the Colombo brand to focus more on its Yoplait yogurt. So yeah, it's a victim of consolidation and mergers and acquisitions. Hey, Brian?
It's hard times. I'm just trying to get some good yogurt out here, you
know. So you were talking a moment ago about in your new neck of the woods down there in Rhode Island, all of the rivers are dammed up, creating marshy areas or mill ponds. And I was watching with the lovely Tracy, the Aerial America series. I'm not sure who put it out. It's like they have like a Aerial America. They went and did like a documentary on the brief, the general history and the top sites of all 50 states. So if you go on YouTube and you look up the Aerial America series, you'll find that there's an hour documentary for each U.S. state, and then they did aerial Greece. The same company. I think it's the Smithsonian puts the stuff out. Anyhow, we were watching the Rhode Island one last night, and your new location is Slatersville or North Slatersville, isn't that right, Brian?
Yes.
Well, this man Samuel Slater was a subject of much discussion in the Aerial America documentary on Rhode Island. And I guess what this man Slater was most famous for was bringing a bunch of mills to the Rhode Island area after Eli's invention of the cotton gin in the late 1700s, the late 18th century. Cotton gin allowed for much more rapid picking of cotton, and so there was the need for there's a need for a growing textile industry in North America in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And so this man, Samuel Slater, was integral to getting all of the mills set up down there in Rhode Island. And his weapon of choice, or the reason he was able to turn a profit, was the prolific use of child labor. I mean, this man he copied a child labor blueprint from the Midlands of England during the Industrial Revolution. It says here. that Slater instituted management principles that he had learned from Strutt and Arkwright to teach workers to be skilled mechanics. This included child labor similar to what existed in England. This off the Wikipedia page. Children aged 7 to 12 were the first employees of the mill. Slater personally supervised them. The first child workers were hired in 1790. Slater also brought a Sunday school system from his native England to his textile factory at Pawtucket. So I just thought it was funny, that the namesake of your new hometown there, Brian, was someone who really believed in the values of capitalism, so much so that the exploitation of child labor was integral to his business career. So you can keep that in mind whenever you hear the name Slater, which I guess you're going to hear a lot down that neck of the woods.
It doesn't get much more American than that, huh?
Yeah. This whole episode with Samuel Slater, Brian, it reminded me of one of my favorite anecdotes, that of the noted textile industrialist from Massachusetts, a certain Francis Cabot Lowell. Brian, you remember this guy? He was the one who, the textile industry was revolutionized on the one end by the cotton gin, which greatly revolutionized it. It made efficient the process of picking and processing cotton. But then the process of making clothes themselves, of course, is something that, like the power loom and the spinning jenny, were two big inventions of the early 1800s that made not the picking and processing of raw cotton, but the transformation of that raw cotton into textiles. Right, the spinning jenny and the power loom were huge. It meant that the textile mills of the Industrial Revolution did not have to rely so heavily on raw human labor in the way that Sam Slater's mills in the late 1700s and early 1800s were totally reliant on child labor. The later mills that were set up in Massachusetts by a certain Francis Cabot Lowell, the namesake of Lowell, Massachusetts, those weren't so labor intensive because they made use of the new automation technology coming out of Manchester and central England. But I mean, the way that the power loom and the spinning jenny were set up were like trade secrets, right? It was hush hush, how to build these things, because the owners of the textile mills in Manchester didn't want competition. So this guy Francis Cabot Lowell, he goes to England to tour the aforementioned mills, and when he's there, he commits to memory the gear ratios of the power loom, and so on his return voyage to the States, he and his family were waylaid by the British Navy in Halifax, Nova Scotia, on suspicion of industrial espionage, namely stealing the gear ratios to the power loom. So they rifled through their sea chests and all their papers and effects, and they couldn't find any evidence at all that Francis Cabot Lowell was engaged in industrial espionage. So they had to let him go. So he went down to Massachusetts and began founding the textile mills that were, for the better part of 150 years, the lifeblood of central and western Massachusetts. So, anyway, that's an interesting story. It's an interesting part of the country there, northern Rhode Island and central Massachusetts. So, anyhow, there was a lot of education about this man, Sam Slater, the textile biz, and your new section of the country, Brian. So, I hope that was wildly fascinating.
Fascinating stuff indeed.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so this past week was Mother's Day. I guess a week ago today was Mother's Day, as we hopefully mentioned on the last podcast. If we didn't, we were derelict in our duty, of course, Brian. But I went up. There's a nice German restaurant in Brunswick, Maine, where our mom calls home. So I went up there and had some delicious German food with her, and brought her some nice flowers and had a chit chat. And all in all, it seemed like a pretty good Mother's Day. Now, one of the huge benefits to moving from like the state where your family is located a couple states away, like Rhode Island, is that it greatly simplifies the logistical front on Mother's Day. You must have been pleased about that, eh, Brian? You just had to maybe call mom, and that's about it.
I sent her a crystal.
You're going to be delighted to learn that she did mention that crystal, and our mom has a move where when she feels emotional, she'll cry, when she's feeling touched, and that's what she was doing. But she doesn't make a noise when she does it. She just gets a big smile on her face, like it looks like a smile. She just kind of shakes, and that's how we call it the smile weep. Anyway, that's how you know that you have hit the bullseye on Mother's Day when we can get Mom to do the smile weep. The thing where she's shedding a tear because she's so touched by the thoughtful gift of her son. And that was certainly the case with the crystal.
Yeah, that's how you know the mission's accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah, mission accomplished. So you can be really pleased that your gift definitely landed.
Well, how was the German restaurant? Did you get some schnitzel?
I got what's the word for it? It's like Halbgeschnitten. I can't quite get the word, but it's the veal with a cream sauce. Delicious. Mom herself had the goulash, and I have to say that German food is delicious, man. This German civilization has much to recommend it.
Is German goulash essentially the same as like Serbian goulash? And also, Did you get the chance to try out some German on the wait staff?
Well, the wait person, no one there spoke German. It was obvious, but I will say that the wait person was very much impressed by the name of the dish, which I now can't remember. It's like Kalbskish. I can't remember what it's called now. But when I was seeing it on the menu, I was able to pronounce it reasonably well, and that got me some kudos from our attendant at the table, so I was pleased about that.
Nicely done.
Hey, just a small point of order here. My landlord has chosen this moment to do his first weed whacking outside my window here. I don't think you can hear anything. It wasn't too loud, but if there's a little bit of a choppy noise, that explains what it is. Of course, it's been a good 7 months since any weed whacking needs to be done. But apparently, the exact block of time we set aside for this podcast is the exact block of time the weed whacking must occur. So apologies if that's a noise in the background.
I don't think it's coming through, I guess, but Sunday morning, good time to do chores, I guess.
I'm glad to hear it. So Brian, this crystal, was it just like a cut, copy and paste Mother's Day gift, or did you have a special meaning behind it? Was there some symbology involved, or did it just seem like something Mom would like?
Well, I mean, it seemed like something she would like. I don't know, crystals. I don't know, maybe they block some 5G waves. I know your lovely fiance there credits some crystals towards some like healing powers or whatnot.
Yeah, that's a pretty common idea. I wonder if there's any truth to it. Maybe there is, but I didn't know if there was any deeper symbology or meaning. But it definitely is something that Mom did like. No question about that.
Well, it's a little obelisk-looking thing, So I figure it doesn't hurt, and it's easier to take care of than a plant. So there you have it.
Is it like a candle or a light or anything, or is it just a crystal?
It's just a crystal.
Okay. All right. Well, moving on from Mother's Day here, Brian, I saw there was an interesting note here on. I saw it pop up on Reddit. It's just a really quick blog post. But I don't know if you recall on Breaking Points this week, there was a segment on the collapsing test scores. Apparently like a third of the kids graduated from high school these days can't read and comprehend like a single paragraph of text. I mean, did you happen to see this segment on Breaking Points by any chance, Brian?
I saw it being advertised. I don't think I actually watched it just because it was like unsurprising. Like it's pretty much what I would expect.
Yeah, it's the Breaking Points crew. Late in particular, our main man Sagar Anchetti. He laid the blame for the collapse in math, reading, and science scores on like the addiction to phone screens, the application of technology in the classroom, et cetera, et cetera. That seems like I guess that was, and then also like absentee parenting or parenting with phone screens, or parents being too friendly with their kids, not disciplining with their kids. So these are the two factors that Breaking Points highlighted, and there were the factors that make sense to me, right? On the one hand, you have the fact that the school is using like Chromebooks, and all the kids have phones and they have a horrible addiction on to whatever social media apps. And then the other half of it is that the parents have an addiction on to social media apps, and they just hand their kid a tablet or just hand their kid a phone in order to avoid having to interact with the child, they're just for a little bit of quiet time. So that makes sense to me, Brian, but this super brief, it's like 2 paragraphs, this blog post here I thought was interesting. It says here, across the West, secondary school test scores are declining. This has been happening for a decade. It accelerated during COVID, but has not reversed with a return to in-person classes. A recent study showed us how bad the problem has become in the U.S. But OECD data shows the trend is actually global, with only East Asia breaking the trend. That data is from 2022, but I am prepared to go on record now saying that the 2025 data, the PSA scores are published every 3 years, will be released later this year or early next year, will show the same pattern. A recent Breaking Points video I watched, which brought the recent US data to my attention, lamented this as a societal collapse and blamed COVID, protective parenting and reduced childhood independence, and screens replacing activities including board games, book, and other more salutary activities, including writing on paper. Mostly they blamed the screens, with Sagar suggesting the data was clear that reading and writing with pen and paper was superior to digital alternatives. However, the data is not at all clear or conclusive. My position, standing on the shoulders of the philosophical giant Mark Fisher, puts the social collapse causally upstream from the device-based distractions. In his book, Capitalist Realism, Fisher describes exactly the digital distraction behavior reported by Western students in the PISA studies, but rather than blaming the devices or the teachers or the students, he blames society at large. Given he was a teacher himself, this might be seen as a cop-out, but I think he's right. Here, a comparison with Asia is insightful, because despite having widespread access to digital devices, China, Korea, Japan, and other countries in the region have bucked the global trend. The difference? They live in a civilization with a future. After a 500-year eclipse by the West, they are reclaiming their natural position at the center of the world and the forefront of college and technology. Europe, the US, and her Five Eyes allies, as well as Latin America, have no such horizon of opportunity to look forward to. Since our leaders cannot articulate a desirable collective future, individual teenagers cannot imagine their place in it. It is not the phones in their bags. Asian kids have those too. It's the neoliberal boomer nihilism. This is both directly as societal sense of dread sinks in from all directions, with people casually and consistently saying that everyone should expect everything to get worse and no one will do anything about it, and indirectly as this nihilism leads to policies which annihilate their material opportunities. It's important to note that the distinction is not national. It is civilizational. Confucian civilization is resilient in the face of digital distraction. Western civilization is not. The answer is not to engage in some absurd and synthetic effort to reanimate the rotting corpse of Western idealism. It is exactly the incompatibility of those two things, a self-consciously Western identity and the universal idealism, which as a matter of historical happenstance was articulated at the western end of the Eurasian landmass, which is the impossible contradiction. The answer, as I've argued elsewhere, is to move as rapidly as possible to a truly global and egalitarian system, which is the only system compatible with Enlightenment-derived ideas like universal human rights. All right, well, that's it, Brian. Let's see. This is this blog is writeinstone.com, and I thought that was really, really interesting. Specifically, this idea that capitalism, or like the capitalism, is incompatible with the notion of universal human rights that arises out of the Enlightenment. You know, so these two children of the Enlightenment, right? Capitalism on the one hand, and the idea of universal human rights on the other. The problem is you can't put both of those genies in the same bottle. I don't know. What did you think, Brian? Anything jump to mind at first blush? I thought that was a fascinating theory, and it's a connection I hadn't made before. That that having a Like, it really makes sense. Like, if you are a high school student, like, what is the point of your studies, right? You have no idea if you're going to go to. We understood that we would be destitute in burger flippers at McDonald's if we didn't go to college and then thereby get a good job. But the link between going to college and getting a good job is broken, and so the link between getting a good grades in high school and getting good grades in college is also broken, and so the link between getting good grades in middle school and getting good grades in high school is like also broken, right? So if there's what is the motivation that these kids are supposed to have to make them want to, learn whatever their teacher's blathering on about? I think it's fascinating, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty on point. I mean, obviously, like the average like wealth of your average Chinese citizen has like exploded over the past couple decades, right?
Yes.
And we've had like the opposite of that here in the States, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm not sure that like it's like doom for the West. We're just kind of going through this thing right now. So you're having like a resurgence of the East, and or at least of like China, and the decline of America. I'm not sure if it'll stay that way like forever, but certainly it's the case right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you, Brian. I don't think it's a terminal illness that we have here in the West. The problem we're having is that we haven't accepted a Marxist critique of capitalism, right? That critique is now over 100 years old, and we still haven't grappled with it here in the United States. Meanwhile, in China, they have used the Marxist critique of capitalism to create some kind of a bizarre hybrid system that's outcompeting us and eating our lunch for us, right? That seems to be the case to me.
Well, I guess it's interesting that like the decline of America and well, because I guess we like lost the war in Vietnam, but I mean, did we lose the war in Vietnam the same way we've like lost the war in Iran, where the consequences are going to be catastrophic for the economy?
Yeah. Right. So I hear you. We lost the war in Vietnam, right? Obviously, all of Vietnam is united under a communist government and remains that way to this very day. But you're saying it wasn't an existential loss for the American empire. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I wasn't there at the time, though, so maybe that could be debated. I'm not really sure what it was like, but I think that they managed to declare victory somehow in the immediate aftermath in a way that, well, Donald Trump...
Vietnam, really?
Yeah.
With the choppers leaving Saigon, and I did not know that.
I think they came up with some kind of pretense, although my recollection of... Yeah, is vague. But in any case, the Donald's already declared victory like 26 times. And,
yeah, who believes it?
This war in Iran. So there's certainly, I don't think there's any way to save face. And as the price of oil continues to rise, and the Donald gets shellacked in the midterms. And in any case, it's interesting that we're having our real first existential loss at the end of the baby boomer saga, right? Like once after we digest that lump goes through the ostrich's neck, like where are we after that is the kind of the question. And like, will our reptilian overlords succeed in enslaving the world before the end of the baby boomer saga, or will the things just normalize and return to... It seems like it could go one of two ways. If they're going to enslave the world, based on that lump going through the ostrich's neck, if they're able to leverage that into complete control or not, it's kind of like a pivotal moment, right?
Yes. It seems to me that the middle class in America, anyway, was more or less the creation of the New Deal, the 1930s era legislation from the Roosevelt administration that was a response to the Great Depression that had all of this, that instituted heavy taxes on the rich and created a massive social safety net, things like unemployment insurance, and Social Security. And that, in essence, the generation that won World War II, born in the 20s, that generation, understood what had happened during the Depression and did everything they could in the post-war years to set up their children for success with things like GI loans, and government programs for housing. The list is tired and well known at this point. And then our parents lived their whole lives in this bubble. Meanwhile, starting in the 70s and accelerating in the 80s and 90s, 2000s through today, you had the ruling class slowly roll back move the taxes off of themselves and onto the rest of society. Slowly, they legalized stock buybacks in the 80s. It used to be before 1973 that health insurance companies were not allowed to be for profit. They were allowed to be for profit starting in the 70s. They brought in second wave feminism, outsourced all of our jobs to China. Right? I mean, though we all know what went down here. We had a hollowing out of the middle class that we're now just coming to grips with as the baby boomers ride off into their golden years. So the question here remains, it was clear in the 1910s and 20s and 30s that everyone was reading those Karl Marx books. That was but between 1850 and 1950, the Karl Marx books revolutionized the histories of some of the biggest countries in the world, like Russia and China and Venezuela and Cuba, and Vietnam. Korea, right? It's like all of these countries had their historical trajectories greatly impacted by the writings of Karl Marx. And we have to, I guess, somehow internalize that lesson. As the world hegemons and starting in World War I and World War II, as the world hegemons, there's been no real reason, with a vivacious and well attended to middle class, there's no reason for anyone to read Karl Marx books about the countdown clock to doom built into the capitalist mode of production and distribution. But we really do have to be cognizant of that history. We really do have to be aware of what capitalism means for overall wealth distribution and what its tendencies are. And its tendencies are obvious. We just talked about it with Sam Slater in the textile mills he opened up in Rhode Island, right? There is a tension between what's good for the individual capitalist who owns the factory and what's good for society at large. Well, it may be very beneficial for Mr. Samuel Slater's pocketbook to enslave children for 12-hour shifts. It's not good for society as a whole to have children with all this potential squandering their lives, sewing clothes or sewing heels onto boots or what have you. It makes me think of Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was a man who lived during the 1800s, of course, and his father went to debtor's prison, in Victorian England. If you ain't paid your bills, then you could go to jail, and that's just what happened to Charles Dickens' old man. So Dickens had no choice but to accept a job as a label paster, right? He had a little cell underneath in the factory, and he would get all of the jars of boot black. It would be his job to paste a label on each and every one of them from sunup to sundown every single day. And of course, that's what prompted Charles Dickens to create characters like Oliver Twist or Ebenezer Scrooge. And it was the reality of capitalism that he lived during his youth. A similar reality to what the children of Rhode Island experienced in the late 1700s, slaving in Sam Slater's textile mills, right? There's a tension between what's profitable and what's good for society, and that is a major issue with capitalism, one that we haven't yet managed to resolve. Interesting stuff. It does make perfect sense to me that if you can't articulate some kind of a vision for the future for people to strive towards, and they're going to stop striving, and that just seems much more explanatory to me than the addictive nature of phones, particularly in view of the fact that Asian kids have the same phones and none of the distractions. So anyway, great article. I thought it was very interesting.
I guess I think if the hypothesis is true that the baby boomer generation had something to do with this for all the reasons you were just saying, that we probably are in the final throes of this crazy thing. And so it's just gonna be like a wild ride as we're really going over the top of Splash Mountain here, and so we're gonna have to relitigate the fight of the 1930s about how we're going to run how we're going to get to a just society, how we're going to make things equitable for everyone and not just a select few at the top of the system. So, yes, indeed, it does seem like we are headed into an era of turbulent politics. Well, we sort this mess out, and the moon-faced school children are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the problems we got to solve. The big challenge before us. Yes. Okay, so Brian, in other news today, on a maybe similarly related topic, it came out that Mayor Mamdani has balanced the New York City budget down there in NYC, so that is very interesting. I do suppose it's worth mentioning that the previous administration left him with a $12 billion budget hole. And I guess at least $4 billion of that is they're getting a temporary reprieve on having to pay their bills back to the state. The state's giving them a $4 billion break, and there's another couple billion in there that's deferred. So it's not as if the problem is permanently solved here, but it certainly is a positive step forward. And it's amazing to see the avowed socialist / communist, Zoran Mamdani, actually doing things right in New York. I think that this is especially in the horrid within the horrid confines of the editorial pages on Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. The ridiculous things they say about Mamdani are all howlers, But I do think that the upper class is terrible. They can't have
the spectacle of a communist administrator competently doing good for the people of New York City, right? That will be a poor advertisement for their assumption that the argument against Marxism was already answered in like 1890 and there's no reason to revisit it, right? That they want everyone to just overlook the Marx books, not crack them, not comprehend them, and not be familiar with them in any way. And the best way to do that is to just laugh off Marxist ideologies like communism or socialism as already disproven. But here we go. We've got Zoran Mamdani so far doing all the right things down there in New York City. That's pretty interesting, Brian. Did you hear anything about this budget balancing on the part of Mr. Mamdani?
I saw the headline that he had squared the budget. I don't know. Has New York sunk into some kind of dystopia, as was warned about by the financiers and whatnot? Not that I'm aware of.
Although the idea is that you can tax, you could never tax the rich. They will simply leave. But I don't understand that argument. At least as far as the landlords are concerned, this is Mamdani is famous for wanting to put a cap on rents. At least as far as the landlords are concerned, they cannot leave the city with their rental properties, right? The rental properties are stuck in the city. Right? It's like we have all these people that work to create all these goods and services every year, and then a different group of people, consume those goods and services. And ideally, you'd like to have a Venn diagram that's as close to a circle as possible, where the same people are doing the producing as are doing the consuming, with the notable exception of like old people and children. Not to hear Samuel Slater say it, but we don't want children to be pedaling the great bicycle of civilization. We want them preparing to be strong peddlers later down the road, and we don't want old people slaving as Walmart greeters either. We'd like them to have a dignified retirement in their golden age. And of course, the sick and infirm also fall into that category, or women who are bearing children. We want to. You don't want to force people to work today to capture a little bit of profit now, but in so doing forego a bunch of profit of having educated, effective workers later down the line. So like this idea that again, we're talking about this idea that the people who make their money by owning things can just up and leave, right? Because it's like. It's like, yes, they can transfer like cash, but that's really like the only kind of asset that's readily transferable. Maybe you get your car, out of New York, on a flatbed railroad line, but really it's like people who make money by owning things, right? Those things that they own are inside this country, and we can just stop them from becoming the beneficiaries of their passive income. We don't have to like stop them from leaving the country. We just have to stop them from using up all of our for being free riders, right? We can't have too much. You really have to balance how many people are going to be consuming things, versus you can't let the owners of things consume too much of the products and service, or the goods and services, right? I know I'm butchering this explanation here, but you have only so many goods and services. You have to be really careful how many of those goods and services you allocate to people just by dint of owning things, right? Because owning things is all well and good, but the economy depends on the people actually doing the work, actually providing goods and services. And so there just becomes, if you don't allocate enough of the rewards, the people who are doing the actual goods and services, right? If you're giving an outsized portion of the rewards to people who just own stuff, well, then that's a recipe for societal dysfunction and collapse and all that stuff, as we've seen time and time again in the history books. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, Brian. Like it's like the things that the passive income that the uber wealthy in New York are availing themselves of is things like the stock market, and apartment buildings, and like those things you can easily control. Like you can just say sorry if you cannot have if you're going to consume in America, you also have to either do a certain amount of work or pay a certain amount of taxes, right? Those are we can't have people consuming for free. And so anyway, I don't know. I just don't see how you could get capital flight out of New York City. I could almost see capital flight out of New York City, but I could never see like national capital flight. Like where are people going to go? You can just You just tell them you either have to pay your U.S. taxes in order to get your U.S. passive income. You're going to have to pay your U.S. taxes. I feel like we could definitely make one dependent on the other, and it wouldn't be too hard. But for an enforcement hoop to jump through. But I don't know. My thoughts, obviously, Brian, are a little scattered on this. But I just can't understand why we worry so much about capital flight. I suspect, much like this idea that there's nothing to see under the Marxism rock, I suspect it might just be a piece of propaganda that people pass around. It sounds smart to say, oh, well, you can't raise taxes on the rich. You only have capital flight. But I just don't see how that would happen. I don't know. Just my 2 cents on the matter.
Well,
yeah.
I'm sure that, as they raise taxes, they engage in some tricks to avoid paying them. But, obviously New York is located where it is for, like, reasons. There's, like, the Hudson River and whatnot. And, like, obviously, like, New Orleans is at the base of the Mississippi. So you'd have to, like, move the Mississippi or something if you were trying to, change where the city's located at, just as an example. Well, I don't know. Until New York descends into some kind of Cold War, Soviet, Stalinist dystopia, seems like it's a success. They'd probably have to report on it on breaking points for me to really believe it. So hopefully they're reporting the truth there. But I don't think that's happened. So
I don't think it's reverting to some hellscape. And how could it be worse? $3,000 and $4,000 rent for tiny little apartments without even a dedicated bathroom. I mean, the situation doesn't seem like it could be that much worse under socialist management. But I suppose time will only tell. This is, after all, only the 5th month of Mr. Mamdani's administration. So I don't know. I'm excited to see it. It's nice to see good, positive, early headlines coming out of the New York City socialism experiment. I'm very heartened and excited to see that.
Yeah, that's just a good point. Like, I don't know, like, why the establishment candidates, like, what is their success story exactly that we're supposed to be holding up as the ideal? I don't know.
On a similar note here, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week that reported that the average student loan defaulter is now nearly 40 years old. This is just federal student loans. I was just reading through the article, and it doesn't include private ones like the ones that plague my life. But I was very interested to see that it's like the average home buyer is just north of 40, and the average student loan defaulter, that is to say, someone who is 270 days or more behind on their student loan repayments, is also nearing 40 years old. So it really goes to show taking the income of children, right, and giving it to banks and giving it to these corporate. That is just it's another example of tension between what's profitable and what's good for society. And the average student loan defaulter being nearly 40 years old shows that these loans are just going later and later and later into people's lives. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that this has been allowed to progress in the way it has, but it just goes to show you have to be really, it's like the finance, right? Finance is another example of this, making money by owning things instead of doing actual work. And you can just see how out of control the interests how the interests of the passively incomed, right? The interests of those who make their money through ownership, like how far those interests have been advanced against the interests of society at large. So I just wanted to note that the average student loan defaulter is nearly 40 years old. Sure is a shocking statistic, Brian. Congratulate you for having paid off your student loans well in advance of your 40th birthday.
Oh man, well, it would be crazy to like live in a society that isn't trying to like take from you at every turn, and and was like trying to like cultivate the youth rather than exploit them mercilessly.
Imagine you grew up in a culture that was trying to help its children to flourish, versus one that was trying to wring you out like a dirty old bar rag for every nickel you're worth, from the time you're 18 onward. It really is a shocking state of affairs.
Well, they immediately want to shackle you to like that cannonball or whatever, as early as possible. So, that's a shocking statistic.
One other piece of news this week, Brian. There wasn't much on the what do you want to say, the dormant Iran war this week. But I did see that the 10-year Treasury note picked up past 4.5%, and that makes me predict that there will be developments in the war this week. We can't have the Treasury, the 10-year T note, or the yield on what the government is paying at the Treasury bond auctions to loan them, some money for 10 years. If that price gets too high, if Treasury has to offer, increasingly high prices because the potential bidders at these bond auctions are skeptical about whether or not this money could actually be paid back. Well, that has major repercussions throughout the rest of the economy. All assets that are, the 10-year T note is considered to be like the price for a risk-free asset. So as risk-free as you can get is still at 4.5% over 10 years. And what happens is when the government starts having to offer higher and higher bond yields, people will pull their money out of other bond, I always like to think of like a layer cake where the 10-year T note is the base at the bottom of the layer cake. And then the next tier up is, when corporations, when like Disney or Walmart wants to raise money, they don't go to a bank and beg for a loan like you or me. They issue public bonds, and people come to buy those public bonds because Disney's a company with some, moment behind its name, and people expect that Disney will pay off its bonds. And then on top of that, on top of the trustworthy corporate lenders, you have tiers of decreasing trustworthiness till you get some of those fly-by-night penny stocks like the ones that Leonardo DiCaprio was hawking in the very beginning of the Wolf of Wall Street. That is to say, bonds issued by fly-by-night companies that are maybe less likely to pay them off as the vaunted Disney Corporation. So you have all of these, the price of all of this debt, right? The price of stocks is at the top of the layer cake. The price of stocks is volatile. You're not getting a guaranteed return necessarily, but it affects the price. It affects stock prices when when the price of a 10-year Treasury note gets too high, because you'd rather invest in at 4.5%. You'd rather invest in the guaranteed money on a T note than the questionable volatile stock price of one of these companies. So anyway, as the war in Iran creates more and more doubt about the evil empire's ability to service its petrodollar debts, then the investor world at large demands slightly higher prices from U.S. Treasury to be willing to loan U.S. money. And as that happens, as the war in Iran makes the cost, pushes up the price of the 10-year T note by throwing the petrodollar into question, that is going to cause dysregulation and dysfunction in financial markets as we get up here to 4.5%. So anyway, because the number is already getting to a worrisome level here, my prediction is that Donald's going to have to move on Iran this week. So I predict we'll see a breaking of the stalemate, Brian. That's what I think. Just looking at no further than the yield on the 10-year T note.
That makes sense. I just can't imagine that breaking the stalemate's going to go well. I mean,
right? Yeah, the Donald has no good options. So I'll be refreshing CNBC tomorrow and Monday morning, just to see where that 10-year T note is headed, and if it stays around 4.5 or ticks up, then that's gonna prompt action. The Donald's gonna have to do something to change public perception of the state of the petrodollar. So interesting stuff, Brian. It's a hell of a time to be alive, as we're always saying on this podcast.
I'm sure we'll be in for some shocking updates in the near future here regarding the war in Iran. Oh man.
I suppose the biggest podcast controversy of this week was noted professor from Canada, Gad Saad. Used to be he's a Lebanese Jew who had to flee Lebanon during the civil war of the late 70s in that country. So he's emigrated to Canada, and he's got his books and his talking points. He turned up on Joe Rogan to defend the actions of the Israeli government. And to suggest that anyone who has a problem with the actions of the Israeli government must have, be harboring dark thoughts about the Jews in general, Brian. It was a shocking interview, but what did you think of it?
Man, I thought it was not very philosophically impressive. Yeah, I mean, Gad Saad's like opinion is that yes, such is the threat of like a nuclear armed Iran that basically any action is like necessary to stop that from happening. And so like never mind that Netanyahu's been saying that Iran is like a a year or something, some amount of time away from a nuclear bomb for
months away.
Yeah, for 30 years here.
Yeah.
But let's see. Well, he has like two main points, right? Like one is that like Trump has agency in this, so we can't blame Israel or Netanyahu for what's happened. And then the other part of his pincer argument, I guess, is that Islam is like an inherently violent religion. Well, I've thought about this a lot since the Sam Harris days. As like I think it's like 15 years ago or so now that Sam Harris was on Bill Maher and he was critiquing Islam, saying it's like a violent religion, and steroided up Ben Affleck playing Batman took umbrage to his comments. And so I mean I think it's perfectly fine to critique Islam. I mean it is one of the tenets of their religion to like unite like the whole world under like the caliphate or some kind of Muslim regime. I mean that's somewhere in the holy books. But the thing is like every like religion is dangerous, and it's quite the case of like the pot calling the kettle black for like the Jewish religion believes that they're God's chosen people and that everyone else is goyim. It's just like it's like a hot take on the tales of like the Epstein releases, and certainly the Jewish religion has it certainly is its beliefs are capable of producing evil as well. So it's crazy that like this critique of Islam. I mean, Sam Harris kind of opened the doors there, but now this critique of for some reason we're not allowed to, I guess, critique. It's not even a religion; it's just this government of Israel. So it's fairly indefensible, I think.
Yeah, man, to hear Gad Saad announce that Islam is a uniquely violent religion, while Israel is pursuing the Greater Israel Project based on scriptural references, was so rich, I could barely stand it. And I can stand a lot of richness, man. But I mean, like, it's like, dude, the Greater Israel Project literally calls for like the expansion and subjugation of everyone living, in the Greater Levant. You've got to be kidding me. I mean, yeah, dude, like the horrifying verses are there, man. They're there in Islam, they're there in Christianity, and they're there in Judaism. I can't believe that this guy would go on. I mean, he's like a college professor. He must have thought about these arguments in advance. I can't understand it. I mean, the guy like writes books, and some of the ideas in his books are clever. But man, I just feel like he must be there's no way this guy's not smart enough to see, to detect the the irony in his arguments. But I think his bread must be buttered, right? He must be getting paid to say this stuff in public. Right? There's no way he could really believe this. What do you think, Brian? Is God's? I mean, the man himself is Jewish, and he doesn't think if his faith is violent. But those people over there, they definitely have a violent expansionist faith. Like, what? Do you think he really believes this, Brian, or do you think he's now? It is. I guess we have to mention that Gad Saad does. He's been pretty open about having worked for the Mossad in the past.
Well,
I mean, it's like, oh man, it can't be. What would you think, Brian? What would you say?
All right. I'm not sure that Gad Saad actually has worked for Mossad. I think what happened is he made some tweets that Dave Smith took seriously or something. I'd have to go down this rabbit hole again, but I think it's somewhat ambiguous. But in any case, really? Israel is like a place that, people love, which probably, I haven't been to Israel, but it seems like a pretty beautiful place.
Oh man, I'm dying to go to Israel, man. It's like, anyway, carry on. Yeah, Jerusalem's got to be one of the great cities to ever visit. But yeah, carry on.
Well, I think, people go to Israel and it's like a beautiful place. And then, I don't know, maybe you see over the wall into Gaza and it's been bombed into the ground and you've got like this fanatical, like a Muslim regime in charge. And I guess you just don't think very hard about it. But I mean, it was crazy, like listening to him, like Joe Rogan was bringing up about how like the coup in Iran and resulting in the fanatical Muslim regime taking over there, and he like Gad Saad just. He's like, well, how responsible is like the violent nature of Islam for this versus the America's meddling? And he described his starting point is like Islam is like 90% responsible for this. And it's just like
insane. Insane.
Well, you could at least start at 50-50 and then like try to sort your way out from there. I don't know. It does seem breathtakingly stupid. And then like Islam, Islam like used to be like the leader in mathematics, right? Like in the
philosophy, like from the Muslim conquest of the 7th century through like the 10th or 11th century, like Islam was the center of world civilization. I think now about the Great Library of Baghdad, if I can try to pronounce it with the proper pronunciation there. It was only when the Mongols came to town and razed Baghdad that put an end to that. But it used to be the center of civilization, right? Muslim society really reached a glorious zenith during the 7, 8, 9, 1000s. I was reading in the Durrance about the many triumphs of Muslim civilization during that period, Brian. So yes, you're exactly right.
The whole argument that like Islam is a violent religion was a lot easier to believe, like in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. But unfortunately, we haven't had a terrorist attack like that to make Gad Saad's propaganda easier to swallow. And then the thing is, though, is I don't even believe the official story about 9/11 in the first place anymore. So, it's just really hard to stomach this idea that like Islam poses some uniquely violent threat to the world. It poses some kind of existential threat, as opposed to. Islam poses this theoretical threat, and so we need to go there and like kill them before that manifests, and that's just like cool in Gad Saad's head. So yeah, I mean, it's just pretty incredible. It seems unfathomable, I guess is what it is, that like this is where we're at. Like it's hard to fathom that people are like on the other side of this issue. Like I guess there must be people who just listen to Gad Saad and like not in agreement, and they would, if they heard what we were saying, they'd be like, well, these are some anti-Semites right here. I don't know how. I just don't know like what would have to happen. Maybe we could get a free trip out to Israel from the Israeli government, and somehow start getting on the other side of this philosophical issue.
Well, I was really grateful that Mr. Rogan had the name of Mohammed Mossadegh on his lips, and the ouster of Mr. Mossadegh in 1953, at the hands of the British and American Secret Services. And then, of course, the installation of the Shah, right? We're out here making the world safe for monarchy. Apparently, in the 1950s, the installation of the brutal regime of the Shah caused the 1979 Islamic Revolution, right? It is a direct billiard ball shot. One directly causes the other. I think Mr. Smith pointed out in his podcast that in 1979, during the revolution, the Revolutionary Guard took a bunch of American hostages, and they took them hostage in the into the headquarters of the new regime. It's like, yeah, the 1979 revolution only happens because of the ouster of Mohammed Mossadegh in the 50s and the installation of a monarchy in that country by the American Secret Service. And so it was nice to see Rogan pushing back on him, Brian, because like you say, it's not. Gad Saad is not just going to be able to go out there and propagate these ideas unchallenged in the predominant media ecosystem anymore. And that, I think, was maybe the most interesting part of the interview. I mean, Gad Saad's points and his attempt to defend the actions of Israel and to make it seem like the U.S. is doing what it's doing independently and not at the behest of Israel. Right? They were fairly sad. But it was interesting to see Rogan, familiar with history, pushing back on the points, And that was the most interesting part of the podcast to me, that he wasn't going to just get away with these sorts of pronouncements. I don't know. Maybe that means it's a new day with respect to the zeitgeist. I don't know exactly, but well, at least Rogan's objections were encouraging.
Well, and I just wanted to talk about the other part of Gad Saad's argument for a bit. Yeah.
Sure. I forgot him. Yeah.
Which is that, Trump has agency. And I think if Trump had agency, what you would see is he would just end this war and try to recover any face that might be possible to save. But instead, what you're going to see is he's going to continue to fall for this escalation trap and get shellacked in the midterms, and ultimately be impeached and whatnot. And then, but also, I don't think Trump had. I'm sure he has some agency, but the thing is if Trump didn't get reelected, he was going to go to jail under the Democratic regime. So he had to accept money from the Adelsons. So I just don't think that he really does have very much agency. Yeah, if he had agency, he would just not keep making the situation worse. So I guess to be fair to Gad Saad, I think the idea that there's this Fuentesian view that it's world Jewry is what he would say is the problem. And that's definitely not what I think. It's not really what the problem is. The thing is a lot of people just love Israel and want this greater Israel project to succeed for a variety of reasons. And so I think people probably do fall into an anti-Semitic rut in terms of thinking about this issue. That probably makes it easier for Gad Saad to hold his ground because he just has to fend off the Nick Fuenteses of the world, and then he doesn't have to think so hard about ascribing 90% of the problem to Iranian Muslim fanaticism. And so I think that probably stops him from having to examine the issue. So I think that's part of the complication. But anyway, I don't think that Trump really, he doesn't really seem, if he had agency, he would stop this war and stop doing stupid things and do good things for America. But instead, he's going to go down in history as a disgrace. And who knows what unholy things will happen as a result of this escalation trap he's gotten us into.
Fuentes, man. God, to the extent that that the Fuenteses of the world are out there, becoming suspicious of world Jewry, Gad Saad is out here intentionally conflating world Jewry with the Israeli government, right? And that's so when Nick Fuentes makes that mistake, right, conflates world Jewry with the Israeli government, I can't help but wonder how much of that is due to Israeli apologists like Dr. Saad going around and pretending that criticism of the Israeli government is the same thing as criticism of the same thing of Jewry in general, criticizing Arthur Levinstein, the dentist down the street. That guy has nothing to do with anything. It's not Jewry that's the issue here. It is a specific government, a tiny minority. It doesn't even describing these people as Jewish isn't really helpful, right? It'd be like describing them as having brown hair or something. We're talking a tiny minority of brown-haired people, or a tiny minority of Jewish people are the troublemakers over there in the Middle East. And it seems like Gad Saad is trying to run cover, is trying to discredit people who criticize the actions of the Israeli government by saying, well, these people must just harbor dark thoughts about world Jewry. But it's just not. It's not that at all. There are weird strains of anti-Semitism left over from the days when the Jewish communities were in charge of the banking houses of Europe during the Middle Ages, because Christians were banned from loaning money by their own faith, right? So you can understand why there would be this weird. The other thing is that the Jews were they were a people without a homeland for hundreds of thousands, for centuries, and so they sometimes formed insular communities. And so there are these weird strains of anti-Semitism for sure, but the oxygen has really been blown on those hot coals by people like Gad Saad, who try to pretend that the world Jews and the Israeli government are one and the same, and they're not. We are not criticizing, when you criticize a genocide in Palestine, you're not criticizing the tenets of Judaism, and you're not criticizing the aforementioned Dr. Levinstein down the street, right? You're criticizing the Likud party, the Knesset, right, the political apparatus of the state of Israel. And it's a funny, self-fulfilling prophecy to pretend that the Likud party and the Knesset are the same as world Jewry, and then complain that people have confused world Jewry, with the actions of these political parties. So, yeah, man, it's a hell of a Chinese finger trap to try to unravel here, Brian. But it made for some interesting listening, but it did not make me feel like I can trust Dr. Gad Saad.
Certainly not. Yeah. I guess that's it, man.
Yes, and I guess that's it for us today, Brian. I'm seeing we're running up against time here. And so I propose to invite all of our System Failure listeners to pay us a little visit over to systemfailure.org. There you can enter in your email address and sign up to receive the weekly System Failure essays written by yours truly right there in your email inbox each and every Sunday morning. And furthermore, if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or myself and let us know how we are fueling the rise of anti-Semitic tropes, you can accomplish that over on the About page simply by clicking on the appropriate name. And with that, I will be back on Thursday with the weekly essay read. And then, of course, next week, Brian and I will be back with a regularly scheduled edition of the good old System Failure podcast. Cannot wait to talk to you all then. In the meantime, hope you're having a great week.
All right. See you, folks.